Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my brother on. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
So, Akil Parker, a black man, father of three, mathematics educator. I've been an educator for the past 19 years. And I also started a company called All This Math, where we have a mission to teach mathematics to the entire black community and finally help us to improve our relationship with mathematics and get over the hurdles and the fear and the trepidation that a lot of us have, and start using math as a resource and something to run toward as opposed to something to run away from, like a lot of us do. So that's the work that we do with All This Math through, offering resources, not just to youth, but to parents, because we want for parents to feel comfortable being able to, provide homework help and not get frustrated and be cussing the kids out like you see on all the Instagram reels and everything,
hmm
especially around this time of year, every school year.
hmm
So yeah, we just, I want our people to win. And I realized the importance of mathematics as a gatekeeper, and mathematics as so foundational to so many other things, and even beyond just the coursework or the actual math problems that people have to do. It develops our critical thinking ability, analytical reasoning ability, and our problem solving ability. So, which is often something that a lot of people, especially young people, but even some adults, never really realize that that's really the true benefit of mathematics is when you're doing those problems using the Pythagorean theorem or y equals mx plus b or quadratic formula, all those formulas that people think they're never going to use in real life.
That
you're
part.
you're developing your brain to be able to deal with problems no matter what the problem may be. And we human beings, we're gonna have problems. It's inevitable. So that's a lot of the positive propaganda that I try to put out to get people to understand that through All This Math as the vehicle.
I think, we were talking before we hit record about, my time in the classroom as a middle school math teacher. I felt like I was always selling a product that no one wanted to buy. And teaching kids that primarily look like me, right, black and brown youth, there was a sense in which math was something that they had to survive. They had to endure. They just had to outlast so they didn't have to do it anymore. If I could go back and talk to myself again, I would probably, not even probably, I would tell myself to engage along the lines of developing math identity in our young people, positive math identity. I know now that I had to serve kind of like a math healer in the
Yeah,
classroom. You know what I'm saying?
definitely.
And because they just had such a negative view of themselves as it pertains to math. Math was this thing that, they had to kind of, dodge, survive, and maybe last all, 12 rounds, if you will, to get out. And so um, I think educators are there though. So here comes my question. If you're an educator who's listening to this and you're hearing math identity for the first time, one, how do they grapple with that term? And then two, how important would you say it is to developing, particularly for black and brown youth, their math identity in the classroom and beyond?
So I think first and foremost, yeah, we got to consider like what is the math identity of the students that you're in front of
Yeah.
already, and we got to be honest about that. And for a lot of us, a lot of our students, and a lot of adults, when we were youth or when they were youth, their math identity was one in which, as you described, they were conditioned, I would say socially engineered, to try to avoid math, based on these fundamental beliefs that were implanted in them that math is too hard, math is not for everybody, you
Yep.
got to have a math gene, you got to be born a math person. And a lot of people buy into that, and the society, promotes that kind of ideology. So a lot of people, even when the math gets difficult, which it's supposed to do, right? It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where you be like, see, I told y'all I wasn't good at math. No, bro, like there's a such thing as productive struggle. You got to learn. This is part of the
Yeah.
learning process. It's like learning how to ride a bike. You're gonna fall down. Like all of us, we got permanent. We grown men and women. We got permanent scars on our knees from when we first learned how to ride a bike. That's part of the process. But you learn
Right.
how to ride a bike though. Math is the same way, but a lot of times we don't believe that. So our math identity is one in which we feel like math is not for us. And I often think of the Lisa Delpit book that she entitled Multiplication is for White People,
Mhm.
based on what a young brother in Louisiana said to her when she was observing a classroom, saying that, we do the easy stuff like addition and subtraction, but the harder stuff, the multiplication and division, that's for the white people.
Yeah.
So this kind of belief permeates that math is not for us. And, when it is the exclusive domain of, other people, which is also interesting because I think about my own experience and a lot of the experience of my peers having went to special admission middle school and special admission high school. And a lot of us, we excelled in mathematics, but then we didn't have the necessary cultural grounding that we should have had a lot of times, and we might not have known the history of mathematics and the fact that Pythagoras from Greece actually studied in ancient Kemet and learned the Pythagorean theorem over there from studying there for 22 years. So
Right.
what ends up happening for a lot of us, unfortunately, is that absent that proper political orientation and proper cultural orientation, even excelling in math becomes problematic at times because it becomes like a passport toward like an honorary whiteness, because you believe
Mm.
fundamentally that math is for the white folks. So if I'm black and I'm doing math, that means I'm one of the exceptional Negroes because I could do what the white people can do. And then that kind of alienates you anyway from your people. Because then it's like you get into the Carter G. Woodson miseducation of the Negro conversation about
Mhm.
how, you become kind of useless to your people because of your training and the way you've been miseducated to think that, you come from a group of people that you really can't serve. Right.
Yeah.
So that happens sometimes. So I think in terms of the math identity, we just have to you know, really do some like historical research and start looking into like exemplars of black people that really did math like throughout history, black people that developed the mathematical principles and findings and theories, and and yeah, just look up the mathematicians and the different scholars, but then even the scholars that were using mathematics that might not even been classified as a scholar. Like I think of a Du Bois as a mathematician, and he did get offered an opportunity to come teach at Tuskegee and to be a teach math at Tuskegee. Only reason he turned it down was because he had already committed to go teach at Wilberforce. And this is before he ends up coming to Philly for 2 years and doing his sociological study, the Philadelphia Negro. But, I think of Du Bois as a mathematician, and I think a lot of other people, that study math in college, like Adam Clayton Powell Jr., you know, Anna Julia Cooper, who had a master's degree in mathematics, or even like Sundiata Acoli, who was in the Black Panther Party and then in the Black Liberation Army with Assata Shakur, and was on the New Jersey Turnpike when they tried to assassinate Assata Shakur, him, and they ended up killing Zayd Malik Shakur. But this brother had a math degree from Prairie View A&M University in Texas and worked for NASA initially, and just kind of just so I think in terms of developing math identity, like all those stories have to be told, and young brothers and sisters have to know that, and that has to be explicitly pushed on them, the same way we're very aware of like who the singers are, who the rappers are, who the comedians are on Instagram, who the athletes are. Like we gotta know who the mathematicians are so we can start to feel like wow, I could do that too. And even if you don't want to be a pure mathematician, as I said earlier, like math is really the gatekeeper and it's foundational. So if you want to be an engineer, a lot of people won't even consider going into engineering, computer science, medicine, architecture, nursing, all these fields, because math is that gatekeeper. So if we kind of create a situation and an environment where our young people are comfortable with math, then it just creates so many options. But that's got to be done. So that math identity, just them believing that, you know, when they think of themselves, like, I can do math, and also give them opportunities to excel in math, so that way they'll feel like, well, I can do this. And, and somebody was saying something recently, like a lot of, I think about like a lot of young brothers, they end up crashing out because they don't feel smart. And one of the best ways to help somebody to feel smart is to have them, position them to be able to excel in math. Because if you're going to excel in math, you just feel like you're smart. You just go, I just feel smart because I can do algebra. I can solve equations. I could graph functions. Whatever. Like you're just gonna because you are intelligent. I mean, not to say that that's another thing too. Like not to say that if you don't excel in math, you're not a smart person, but you definitely are gonna feel smart. You might feel unsmart, but you definitely will feel smart if you excel in different levels of mathematics. So yeah, that definitely is it's life altering.
The potential of math, the impact that math has in a young person's life, right? Young people come to us and they're asking the question all the time, who am I? Right? They're asking it of themselves and they're getting messages, whether that be through friends, whether that be through curricula, whether that be through teachers, whether that be through administrators, whether that be through systems, whatever it is, they are getting the answer to that question. And it's very interesting to think about how many of us as educators can point to entertainers, can point to rappers, can point to athletes, can point to these other stereotypical fields when it comes to black and brown children, but don't know the names you just mentioned, or not even knew that they existed. Right? That's not even a possibility in their mind. So when I think about building that math identity, I feel like for folks who are listening, that's got to be ground zero. You've got to be able to do the work in that history to be able to affect the children in the present. And then the second thing I wanted to say, and I want to kick it to you on this, is the levels of success that one could feel when we take math and apply it to things that are just happening in the real world. Baking a cake, right? You got an old school recipe from an ancestor, an elder, and they would bake it this size, but now you have X amount of people and you have to enlarge, right? Now they're doing proportions with fractions and it's very real. Those types of things require almost a dexterity in our teachers. So they're not just students of the curricula or the tool or the thing, but they're also students of their students, where they're connecting in a very real way with who they are. So I guess my question to you is you do this naturally in your videos, obviously in your experience as a black man in these yet to be United States, but for someone who is trying to do what seems like it comes naturally, how can they begin to consider these things and infuse them into their practice?
Well, just as you said, like, being a student of your students. So learning who your students are and also like respecting the culture and the background of our students and not looking at it from a what is it, a deficit model?
Deficit mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, the deficit mindset. We gotta like disabuse ourselves of that. And I don't, yeah, that just has to happen. I don't know how somebody that their whole life, if you're the white teacher that wants to be like Michelle Pfeiffer and come into the ghetto and save the Negro, the wayward Negroes. I don't know how to tell you how to how to switch that up, but a lot of us, that are black, have kind of a bourgeois kind of ideology that we have to disabuse ourselves of as well and really begin to appreciate the humanity because it's like like something that Du Bois said. He said so many things, but one of the things he said was like I begin of all in the beginning of all my studies, I begin all my studies with the fundamental assumption that the African is a human. And so many times, like we don't, the society and many individuals within it do not begin their interaction and engagement with black people generally, black children specifically, with the fundamental belief that we're human. And we see it in terms of like how we respond to, stressful situations. Because a lot of times it's just like human beings having challenges. But when you are immediately and you go to, okay, being overly punitive or not considering, well, why did he do that? Or like, why did he get mad? Or like, why, a human being would respond like that. That makes sense, and it doesn't mean that there's not room for correction and restorative practices or whatever, but at least fundamentally understand like, okay, this does not mean that this person is, irredeemable, right? They would just, and then on top of that, we're dealing with children. Children are not finished products. So that's
Right.
another thing too. So if we, appreciate the humanity of the children, then it's much easier to, you know, be able to teach them, and be able to kind of meet them where they are, and then try to develop math content where that caters toward, their culture, their background, their community, so we can kind of, make the mathematics more real and more applicable. Because the best question that students ask is a question that used to offend me when I was young in the game, early teaching, right? Because I would be in my feelings, and I felt like, it was an attack on me as an individual. It's like, why do I have to learn this?
Why?
When am I going to use this? What's the
Yeah.
purpose of this? That's really the best question a student can ask, and we actually should welcome that question. I think what happens is, far too often, not enough teachers have an answer to that question, or answers. I'm going to say answers plural, because the appropriate answer to that question is not going to be the same for every student, right?
Mm.
But so like that's one of the things I do that you kind of mentioned, because you recognize it, is that I'm constantly trying to create content on the YouTube channel or on social media where I'm answering that question, like, okay, this is what we can use y equals mx plus b for. Because every time I cringe every time somebody makes that post. Another day went by, I never use it, and I know it's like,
Yeah.
partly humor, but in every
Yeah.
pound of jokes, there's an ounce of truth, right?
There it is. Yeah.
So I'm like always, I'm like, all right, boom, here go another reason, another way you could use it, another way you could use it, and the thing
Yeah.
about it is that a lot of people that make the complaint that they don't use it, they actually do use it, but they just don't know. They don't use it. They don't know that they're using it because they never really were effectively taught the language of mathematics. Because that's all mathematics is. It's a language. Like so many things we say, so many of our idioms, our common phrases and expressions can be translated into mathematical equations, mathematical inequalities, mathematical expressions. But if you never learned that language, you wouldn't know. But if I sit you down and break it down for you, like, we talk in math language all the time. We just don't know that we're doing that. Just like everything that we say in English can be translated to, Yoruba or Kiswahili or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, so we could be speaking Kiswahili right now. But if you don't know Kiswahili, you'll think, well, Kiswahili is irrelevant. That don't got nothing to do with me. But we could be speaking Kiswahili right now, right? So, a lot of it is just making content and making math problems in your classrooms that incorporate your students and get them to think and get them to learn the formulas and the different algorithms and also the concepts of the mathematics, you know in their own life, with what they're already doing, like meeting them where they are, and then also letting them know this, that even if you have to use an example that is irrelevant to them, it's about the it's
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, like I always say, like the analogy, like, you go to the store and you buy a picture frame. The formula is just a picture frame, right? The method is a picture frame. When you get home with the picture frame, you take the stock photo out of the picture frame and throw that away. And then you put your photo in there. So knowing how to do the math, or use the formula, or use the algorithm, is beneficial, because then you might learn it in school using content or information that's totally irrelevant to your life, that you don't even care about, right? But you learn the process, and then you say, oh, but this thing that I do care about, this aspect of my life, I can use it for that though. And I can apply it to that. So that's something else that has to be, like, really, really emphasized, like that this is a tool, right? And we got to figure out, and you can use this tool to apply to your own life.
Which is major, right? Because when folks hear the question, for example, what does a mathematician look like? What does it take
Hmm.
to be a mathematician? They don't think about folks like you and I on the screen, typically. When I've asked my students who look like you and I about it, they describe a white guy with glasses, right? Like that's with the lab coat on, maybe, or something like that.
The blazer with the elbow patches.
With the elbow patches, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
the bald head white
Uh,
guy.
that
Yeah, yeah.
so when you had a conversation and you engage with them, and they want to know, really what they're saying is, they feel like they can't do it, but then two, they are also saying that they don't know what it really does take. Like the ingredients, yeah, sure, there are formulas and productive struggle that's required to learn the things, but at its core, it's curiosity. At its core, it's problem solving and critical thinking. At its core, it's dedication. At its core, is persistence. Right? I When we talk about young people and them stopping before the race even gets good, where can they learn perseverance in a very real way every day? It's in math.
Hmm.
It is that connection point between this thing that I'm doing on this paper helps me understand, categorize, and further apply this concept in real life if we were to teach it that way. Um, and so this, queuing it up for you, when we talk about what it takes to belong, to be, to exist, to breathe, to actually embody a mathematician's stance for our young people. One, what do they need to know about that, right? And you've kind of touched on that already. But then also, in addition, what are the things that we should be doing now for the students who will be in our classrooms? Like, so you and I, we're, East Coast students have kind of started this week for most of
Hmm.
us. My kids, they come Friday, right? September, was that the 6th? So at the time of this recording, that's where they were right at the beginning of the year. So for whatever point of the year that folks will listen to this, what are some things they should be doing now to prepare for that day?
Well, if you don't already, one thing that comes to mind, and this is a adjustment I had to make in terms of my teaching practice, is in mathematics, especially, to begin to embrace mistakes and reorient yourself toward mistakes. You know, I was taught as a student that the focus was more perfection, just solely about getting the right answer. But what I find, so when I became a classroom teacher, I kind of brought that baggage with me. And I missed out on a lot of opportunities where we could, focus on the mistakes and even like create an environment where students wouldn't be uncomfortable making mistakes and they could learn from their mistakes. Because
Right, right.
again, that's part of being a mathematician, just like similar to being a scientist. With science, you hear about the Nobel Prize winner and the major discovery, like discovering the cure for this disease or that disease. But what you don't hear about is the 50,000 experiments that didn't have the outcome that they wanted, right? So you can look at that as like, well, they made a mistake. They didn't get it right. They screwed it up, right? But they don't talk about it like that because that's just part of the process. So with math, making the mistakes is part of the process. Now you might okay, that might mean you don't get 100 on the classwork assignment. You don't get 100 on the quiz or whatever. But putting forth the effort and learning from your mistakes, is so invaluable. You know, so that's definitely something that, I want people to consider and think about, this school year and from now on, just embracing the mistakes and having their students and as a teacher embracing the mistakes. Because I mean, as teachers, we make mistakes too. Come up
That
with a
part.
lesson plan. We think the lesson plan is perfect. This is going to work. I'm going to hit these targets. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. And it just don't work. It just don't work. You got to go back to the drawing board after school that day, and then you come back the next day. Okay, we're going to reteach this, because then you realize it was a prerequisite skill that a lot of my students didn't have. That's why the lesson didn't work. I assumed that they knew this. They didn't know it. But now I learned it. I made the mistake, and now I learned from the mistake. So now we come back tomorrow. Now I got them. I'm gonna get them straight tomorrow, because now I know what I need to teach, because I made the mistake and I learned from it, and it's
Yep.
it's okay.
Yep.
No need to beat yourself up over it. And
Right.
so we teach the students that the same way. And also it's how we respond when they make mistakes. You know,
Hmm.
are we do we sound disappointed when they give a wrong answer? They tell you like, you know, negative 4 times 5 is positive 40. Like, you sound disappointed, well, actually, I mean, I might be a little disappointed, but it's out of love though. I'm like, bro,
Yes,
come
that
on,
part.
bro. Like, come on. It's not 40, bro. Come on. All right. You gotta know. But then that's the teachable moment. Like, and then, if I could emphasize this too, like having math students especially like have their multiplication facts memorized. Gotta have that.
Mm,
Gotta have the multiplication facts memorized. Because it's so foundational to any level. Right. And also, having students not be so caught up in grade levels in terms of their instruction, because students being caught up in grade levels and being so submissive to that idea is what keeps a lot of students from learning the multiplication facts, because you might have a ninth grader or a 10th grader that really needs to know their multiplication facts and they do not know them. However, what that ninth grader or 10th grader does know is that, oh, this is elementary school level work. So they're like, I'm not doing it because it's elementary school level work. But then it's like, bro, but if you don't do it, then you can't do the ninth and 10th grade work. So, but the embarrassment that's attached to them actually having to learn something that elementary school students are learning at that same time will often, prohibit them from even advancing. And they'll just be like, well, it's too late. If I didn't learn it back then, I can't learn it. But we should know, and the children should know, it's never too late. Even adults, parents. I'm promoting and trying to encourage and recommend to parents. Like, a lot of parents have children that are in school now, and a lot of them have deficiencies that they never got over. They got out of school, they got their high school diploma, but there was a lot of math that they didn't learn. So I'm like, now it's never too late for you to learn it, and because you want to be able to help your children with their homework, that's what you want to be able to do. So so there's that, and teachers also continue to develop yourself as a practitioner, and math teachers, make sure you're studying math, and make sure you are on a regular basis, and make sure you develop a conceptual understanding, and make sure you understand what the order of operations is, as an example, right? So you're not one of these people on social media arguing loud and wrong, doing the order of operations incorrectly. Understand the distinction between, just as a specific example, the distinction between PEMDAS and the order of operations. Because a lot of people I'm finding, they didn't learn the full, comprehensive description of the order of operations. What they learned was PEMDAS. And logically speaking, if you only learn PEMDAS, I too would think that, oh, well, the M is always before the D in PEMDAS, so that means I always multiply before I divide. Or the P stands for parentheses, so that means whenever I see parentheses, regardless of the context of the problem or what the parentheses represent, I should do that operation first. No, if it's not a grouping symbol, we're not doing it first. If we're not using the parentheses as a grouping symbol, if it's just a multiplication symbol, basically, then we treat it like a multiplication symbol, and
Right.
we follow the rules. But it's constant work, and a lot of people, they there's content issues that people have sometimes. There's instructional delivery issues people have sometimes, and that's why we got to constantly work at it. And a lot of times you got to unlearn some things that you might have learned when you were in high school or you were in middle school as a classroom teacher. So yeah, we definitely recommend and highly encourage classroom teachers to develop your pedagogy on a regular basis.
Affirm that wholeheartedly. I think one of the things that I hope that folks get from this conversation is it's okay to unlearn, right? I've been doing it this way for 20 years. You might have been doing it wrong, or there's probably a better way to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, uh, time in a thing doesn't mean you've been doing it effectively, and so always be willing to hold your the way you do things, your knowledge of a thing, your pedagogy with an open hand, and put yourself in a position to maximize what is it you do for the students that are in front of you. I hope that our listeners get that from you. I hope that we can kind of reclaim math identity, particularly for our Black children, and I hope that we could be honest about the fact that it's not on accident that Black people aren't in these fields doing these things. That's not an accident. That is an intentional act that needs your intentional work to
Social
uh
engineering. Social
that part.
engineering. If you can, like, so on in two ways, right? So I think about the in terms of labor supply, labor and economics. On the one hand, if you have all these black children that have been programmed from an early age, that math is too difficult, math success and math proficiency is unattainable, they essentially they disqualify themselves from competition for STEM careers and STEM opportunities,
That
right?
part.
So those that are being educated in a way where they're being told, like, no, you can do algebra, you can excel in arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, right? Those children have less competition because you got all these millions of black kids that believe that math is too hard, and that's not for us. what math, one of the deeper values of mathematical proficiency and mathematical practice, which is, like I said earlier, the critical thinking ability, the problem solving ability.
Mm. Hmm.
Amos Wilson spoke about how the problems of the black community are a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Wow.
Then it's like all these problems that we have that will persist because so many of us kind of check out and opt out from, in my opinion, the major subject that would enable us to learn how to solve our problems.
Hmm.
So those problems are able to persist. So those that will benefit from our problems existing will continue to win.
Absolutely.
Those are, so yeah, like you said, it's nothing like what AZ say on Illmatic. It's nothing coincidental or accidental. No, nothing at all. Like, this is well thought out, well planned, and these aren't new problems either. I think some people may come into the profession,
I think
in
it's been, yeah.
2024 thinking that this is a new issue. Like, people have been, deficient in mathematics. People have been dropping out of school since in the 1950s. This was happening in the 1920s, 1930s. Like, this is a persistent problem. So when something is consistent like that, and we got to start to realize, like, well, who's benefit? You got to start thinking about, well, who's benefiting from this. This has been going
That's
on
so
because I
true.
and that right there, that this is why it's so important for us to really, for all the people that may think, well, math is irrelevant, I don't need this. It really affects how we think and how we process information and how we process our environment. Even just thinking like, okay, well, who's benefiting from this? Because then you're talking about, okay, well, is this a zero sum game? And it is, because oftentimes when we're harmed by something or any individual is harmed by something, we tend to believe that, well, everybody must be being harmed by this, not understanding that for every problem we have, somebody is benefiting from it on the other side.
Mm.
That's a mathematical relationship,
Yeah.
essentially. So doing the math and kind of training our brains and cognitively process information in that way will help us to see the world differently. So
Yeah.
when we see problems around us, we'll actually recognize the problem, because I think that's the first issue. The first step is to even recognize the problem. A lot of us don't even recognize problems. Like, we just, kind of on some Lil Wayne stuff, like, I ain't got no worries. Like, we don't
Yeah.
even know that
Yeah.
that's is a problem, around us, right? But first recognize the problem, and then have a system in place in order to solve the problem, and know how to approach the problem, know what type of resources you need in order to solve the problem, know who you need to partner with or not partner with in order to solve the problem. you know
100%.
all of these things, like, this is a mathematical approach to just our daily existence. Again, it's like a hidden benefit of math, but again, that's why, I'm thoroughly convinced that, this is very intentional, is well calculated, well laid out. That so many of us would have to be programmed to fear and avoid math at all costs, because I believe math is the key. Math is the key to the solution to all of this. So once more of us start doing math, that's when society changes, because then you start thinking like, because a lot of the things that the society is where it is, because a lot of us tolerate a lot of things that shouldn't be tolerated on such a grand scale, right?
Yes,
We're so
sir.
easily, many of us are so easily distracted, and a lot of people, we're good people, generally good people, but I think a lot of us just don't understand how our actions affect and influence the maintenance of the status quo, because
Let
we
me
just
jump in here
don't understand.
and
Yeah,
let me jump in here real quick to say, like, in a very real way, if Pearson makes the book and Pearson makes the test and the children don't pass the test, then Pearson can then make the the books or the curricular tools needed for those students who didn't pass the test. Pearson is making money off of failing our kids. They're not going to give you the answer to the thing that will make them less money. It just is not economics. It's not how it works. And so it's going to take, like you're talking about, the intentional work of educators with a consciousness about how these things work out to understand that there is someone benefiting from the failure of our students. And if we could do that, we can just get back in touch with that human aspect of even the failure of our babies, we would see that we have to step up. We have to do something different, and we have to. There's so much riding on whether or not we get in the game on this. You know what I mean? And I want you to finish your thought because I jumped in, but then also I want you to plug, man. How can folks get in touch with you? How can folks connect with you, and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty much done, but you just reminded me of something when you made that comment. I used to tell students like, listen, your failure is financially beneficial for me. I remember teaching at Overbrook High School over in West Philly, and I did credit recovery. And credit recovery is like this. It's like an after school program. I'm trying to describe it
Hmm.
accurately. Actually,
Hmm.
I don't want to give the advertised definition of it. It's like after school students that have failed a class, they go into a room, they do these online math problems or whatever type of problems, And I was a math teacher, so I was able to just kind of be there as kind of like a proctor, like watching them and kind of helping them, helping them as they're going through these different modules and whatnot. But we in there, we getting, I'm getting $40 an hour to do this, and it's easy money. But then one day I'm thinking, I'm like, yo, if nobody failed in these classes, I wouldn't be getting this $40 an hour. And I'm doing it like 2 hours, 2 hours a day, twice a week. So that's, 40 times two is 80, 80 times two is one. So I'm getting $160 just to kind of chill, because these students have failed, you know. But just so I would tell my students this because I wanted them to realize how, again, that concept, just the concept of a zero sum game. And then you think about teaching summer school, right? And I'm not saying that I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not saying that teachers should not be paid for their time, right? Because they should. Everybody should be paid for their time, should be compensated. But just the fact that it is like there's an incentive, like you talk about Pearson, there's an incentive, or and I think it's a systemic problem. There's more of an incentive for there to be failure at times than because it's more profitable. Because then you can say, oh, we need another program, so we need more grant money for this, we need more grant money for that. Because I remember Kwame Ture saying, like, back in the '60s, he said, a lot of people in the what did he say, the black middle class or the black bourgeoisie, he said, they didn't like H. Rap Brown when H. Rap Brown would get up at a speech or a march or whatever and say burn the country down. But then he said, but every time Rap Brown says burn the country down, they get another poverty program. So that means they're getting money, they're getting government funding to start another program in the inner city. So it's actually beneficial because Rap Brown and other the militant and revolutionary black people in that time in the Black Power movement are talking what they're talking, and then the government responds to that by giving certain people money. So it's like it was beneficial. So Kwame Ture is exposing that, like, why y'all so mad for? You actually shouldn't be mad. You actually should be thanking us, like, because you're being compensated very well because of the fear of the federal government in terms of them wanting to stifle and prevent more young people, more young black people in the urban areas and inner cities all across this country from actually listening to what we're saying and becoming more politically radical and more militant. But just, yeah, that concept is one that people really I think people really have to understand. They gotta begin to understand that that zero sum game and cui bono, the Latin phrase, which means, I think technically it's for the good, meaning like who benefits. Because we always should ask who benefits. We often ask, or we're able to see who's harmed, but we don't consider who benefits. And once you start to see who benefits from a problem, then that gives you a different perception on the problem, because then, and you identify those people, then you might realize, like, wait, the companies and the entities that are actually benefiting, they're trying to slide up next to us and like act like we all in this together, right? And we're being harmed, right? So, because it's like, okay, well, and again, when you think about it from a business standpoint, you know, it's like one thing is like, so again, the problems of the black community being a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So you got this company A over here is making $1 billion a year off of this problem. But then company A will also have a department within their corporation that might say, oh, take $200,000 and go start a program in that community that has all these problems that we're benefiting from and making $1 billion off of. That 200,000 is a drop in the bucket. It's really a drop in the bucket compared to that billion, but I can
Right.
do that and I can get good PR,
Right.
right? And get attention and make it seem like, look, we all in this together. We're trying to fix this problem. You don't want to fix this problem because you're making too much money off of this problem. But if we don't never sit back and think, well, who's benefiting, then we'll really believe that that entity or that corporation really does want to end the problem. Yeah. So if anybody wants to get in contact with me, the website is allthismath.com. please go to the YouTube channel. Definitely go to the YouTube channel. Go on YouTube and go to All This Math. We have over 5,000 subscribers right now. Recently eclipsed 5,000 about a month ago. We're up to like 5,200. So we gained about 200 more subscribers, as the school year has started. So I'm looking forward to the growth this year. And we're also on Instagram, All This Math. Well, I'm on TikTok, but I got to start adding more content on TikTok. My daughter told me that's where the young people are, so that's where I got to go. I got to start putting content up on TikTok as well, and I do plan to do that. But yeah, I want our people to win, and definitely go to the YouTube channel. It's a resource for children, for homework help, or test prep. It's a resource for parents because I want parents to be able to get over their fear of math. And I try my best to explain things in very simple and relatable ways and culturally relevant ways. And you're going to get, some Black history infused in some of the videos. And also it's a tool for teachers as well, because it's professional development for math teachers. Because a lot of times in the videos, I naturally incorporate, what I do in my math methods course that I teach at Cheney. And then I've been teaching at Cheney for the past 6 years. So a lot of times I'm showing people how to teach stuff, like how would you best teach this, or why I wouldn't say this, or why I wouldn't say that, or what students often have issues with, or if you're a parent, like what your child might be confused about. I'm putting that all in there, so it's really something for definitely like for everybody: parent, child, grandparent, uncle, auntie, whoever, your rich auntie, whatever, like whoever, like because I want for everybody to be able to help children with their homework, right, with their math homework. And I know that's a tall order, but it's a tall order because a lot of the adults don't know the math. So I'm like, okay, well, let me create a resource where they can easily learn and understand the math so that they can sit down with a child and say, okay, let me help you with your homework. Instead of saying, okay, instead of being upset, complaining when report cards come out, when standardized test scores come out, everybody's up at arms. I'm like, okay, the solution is we got to, prioritize as adults, sitting down with children and helping them with homework, even if they're not our own biological children. We got to figure out how to do that, but we got to know the content. So that's why I made the YouTube channel. So just as easily as, brothers learn how to, do their own oil change so they can save money on YouTube. Sisters might learn how to do makeup, on their own so they can save money on YouTube University. You can also go to YouTube and learn some of the math that you never learned, years ago, or that you learned years ago, but you forgot.
100%, bro. I appreciate you, man, taking this time, and I really hope that the listeners connect for sure. If you follow or are tapped into my brother's page, feel free to hop on over to Liberation Lab. We are also on YouTube, man. There's enough for everyone out here, so feel free to tap into my brother's program, what he's doing, his YouTube page. It's phenomenal stuff over there. I think every educator, every parent can benefit from. So thank you, brother, for tapping in, and we look forward to what comes from this. So thank you for taking this time.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.